When the investigators entered Queen Camilla's private residence, they were not prepared for what was about to unfold. At first, they thought it was just a routine check, nothing unusual. However, when they broke open the Queen's private garage, everything changed in an instant. Beneath layers of thick dust and carefully stacked boxes, they discovered something the palace had never wanted the public to know. What they discovered was not only shocking, but also carried a great deal of danger. This secret had been carefully hidden, and immediately everyone involved was ordered to remain absolutely silent. While Camilla maintained her silence, the witnesses couldn't believe their eyes. It was Ray Milhouse who uncovered the secret chest and revealed a truth about Diana that no one had ever suspected. If you find this story interesting, leave a comment with the number 1. If not, leave a comment with the number 0. Don't forget to like, share the video, and comment your thoughts below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on other exciting videos. Now let's dive into the story. Hidden behind dense hedges and heavy iron gates of the Ray Mill estate in Wiltshire lies a secret the royal family doesn't want to reveal. From the outside, it appears to be a modest, quaint, and peaceful farm, completely different from the grandeur of Buckingham Palace or the formality of Clarence House. But for Queen Camilla, this home nestled in the tranquil village of Loch is more than just bricks and climbing vines. The house purchased by her in 1995 after her divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles was not just a retreat, but also a place where she found freedom. It was a place where the strict rules of the palace held no power, and no one could closely monitor her. Notably, Ray Mill was not royal property, meaning no royal audits, no official records, and no one had the right to enter without permission. Camilla maintained her own style even after becoming the wife of Prince Charles. No royal staff were allowed at her residence, and no ceremonies were held at the gate. This was a private space, a world ruled solely by Camilla, completely separate from the world she married into. But by early 2025, everything suddenly changed. Quietly, without any reporters or cameras present, a legal notice was issued. The announcement mentioned only a recently approved real estate investment in the Wiltshire area. No names, no fanfare, but for those familiar with the region, it was a clear allusion to the grounds of Ray Mill House. Immediately, rumors began to spread. Why was the private residence of Queen Camilla suddenly drawing the attention of officials? Anonymous sources revealed that a senior parliament official had received confidential information from this source. The vague but definite notice emphasized that certain documents, including some of royal significance, had been stolen and illicitly concealed. Although the house is not officially royal property, it holds a close connection to the monarchy. And that was the justified reason for allowing a search to take place. On a cold, gloomy morning, officials quietly entered the Ray Mill grounds. Camilla was not present, perhaps due to royal duties or personal reasons. They had only 4 hours to carry out their work under strict instructions. Their mission was to search the basement garage or storage areas for objects of historical value. But what they discovered far exceeded all expectations. Behind the massive garage doors with a facade built of ancient stone and thick oak beams, the initial investigation team thought they would find nothing more than old crates, gardening tools, or forgotten furniture. But the truth was very different. Hidden behind the garage, beneath worn tarps and old wooden crates, they discovered a small wooden door, unlike anything in the original design of the house. Many had assumed it was simply a rustic charm of the garage. But when the door was opened, the atmosphere immediately shifted. Beyond the door lay a narrow hallway, dimly lit and covered in cobwebs. At the end of the corridor was a small room, its door firmly shut, utterly silent and empty. There were no windows, only a flickering light hanging above. In the center of the room, resting on the floor, was a large wooden chest, its hinges rusted and the wood worn by time, quietly holding secrets yet to be revealed. The chest hadn't been moved for decades. Inside, investigators found stacks of old letters carefully tied with ribbons alongside leather-bound journals wrapped in thin silk scarves faded by time. They opened just one, and everything changed instantly. The unmistakable handwriting, the chilling words that filled the pages created an intense atmosphere. At the bottom was a signature Diana. But how did these letters really come from Diana? And why were they hidden away in Queen Camilla's garage? This secret remains a mystery that continues to intrigue many. Stay tuned to uncover more never-before-revealed truths about this mysterious chest. The chest in Queen Camilla's garage didn't make headlines or spark drama, but the story behind it is truly extraordinary. Ray Mill, the peaceful estate in the village of Lack, Wiltshire, had always been her private retreat. Yet in May 2025, that tranquility was shattered. The spacious garage looked like a typical dusty storage space found in old royal estates. Sturdy concrete floors, strong steel beams overhead, and the scent of machine oil mixed with aged wood. Queen Camilla was believed to use this space for storing belongings, gardening tools, old furniture, and even vintage cars. However, the unexpected happened when investigators began their search inside the garage. As the investigation team moved through the garage during the court-authorized search, they noticed something unusual. Near the far wall, a faint breeze slipped through a wooden panel that had gone unnoticed. Behind that panel lay a secret corridor, narrow, silent, and filled with the scent of damp wood mixed with the weight of time. The passage was barely wide enough for one person winding behind the garage wall and leading to a small stone room with a low ceiling. The room was modest in size but carried a heavy, almost sacred atmosphere. At its center stood a cracked wooden chest, sealed shut with a rusty iron clasp. The chest wasn't deeply buried or tightly locked, but it was clearly placed with care to avoid easy detection. Someone wanted to keep it out of sight, yet still accessible. When the lid was opened, the atmosphere shifted not dusty, but overwhelming, as if stepping into a deeply private space. Inside the chest lay delicate silk fabrics, brittle ribbons, and carefully preserved bundles of paper treated like precious artifacts. Letters, diaries, and handwritten notes, all stained by time, holding stories never before told. Among the precious documents kept inside the old chest, one envelope stood out marked boldly in bright red ink. On it was a simple but serious warning: do not open without permission. There was no sender's name, no date, no identifying marks. Yet the envelope was opened, drawn by an irresistible urge. Inside, the handwriting was soft, gentle, yet filled with weight, a voice unmistakable. One of the investigators was said to have whispered quietly, "It's her, Diana." The opening lines echoed like a voice from the past. Without naming anyone, the writer let their emotions speak for themselves. A diary page began with a haunting reflection. There are days when I no longer recognize myself. What he says about me travels farther than what he says to me. And she is always present, always watching, always silently terrifying. The words carried a heavy ache like a confession buried too long in unshared loneliness. In another passage just weeks before the fateful trip to France in 1997, Diana's emotions became clearer than ever. I have come to realize that this is not a battle I can win. Some battles are not meant to be fought in the daylight. I don't want my sons to hate her. I only want them to understand. But understanding never eased the pain. It only deepened the wounds like ink soaking into the pages with no hope of washing away. Those diary entries aren't filled with anger or blame. Instead, they carry a deep sorrow, a quiet resignation heavy with pain. Not once is a name mentioned, yet everyone understands who the subject is, Camilla. Then, as an investigator flipped to the back cover of one of the journals, they paused, stunned. The final words, simple yet haunting, read, "If anything happens to me, please make sure someone finds this. Not for revenge, but to uncover the truth." Immediately afterward, all the documents inside the chest were sealed and placed under strict royal protection. Urgent phone calls echoed throughout London. The palace was notified at once. Ray Mill, once Camilla's quiet refuge, had now become the epicenter of a shock wave, capable of shaking the very foundations of the monarchy. Her silent retreat had inadvertently unveiled a secret, powerful enough to change everything. What happens next? Stay tuned. That discovery changed everything. Diana's voice, once thought to be silenced forever, suddenly echoed from Camilla's private home. As dawn broke outside Ray Mill House, tranquility remained as if nothing had happened. The iron gates stayed firmly shut. The gravel path showed no footprints, and ivy-covered walls stood still under the pale morning light. But inside, that silence was only a facade. Something had shifted quietly yet irreversibly. The chest was quietly removed, its door sealed as if no one had ever entered. But within the royal palace, an undercurrent began to rise. Those documents, strangely discovered in Queen Camilla's garage, were no longer silent, anonymous papers. They had ignited the spark of an uncontrollable internal crisis. Immediately, handwriting experts, royal lawyers, and archivists were summoned in secrecy. Everyone understood this was no longer a private matter. Page by page, they confirmed what many had only dared to whisper. That handwriting, those words, were undeniably Princess Diana's. No lengthy forensic tests were needed. There was no mistaking it. A voice both fragile and sharp, untouched by time or politics. Camilla's garage, still familiar, spacious, cluttered with garden tools and vintage cars covered by tarps. But beneath that ordinary facade lay something far beyond mere curiosity. That chest held fragments of a soul, carefully wrapped in silk, tied with faded ribbons. These were handwritten letters, diaries, and short yet deeply emotional notes, each one a breath of Diana through turbulent years. Their presence here in Camilla's private space was like a silent explosion, and as people began to read, the first thing they felt wasn't anger, but a profound sadness. Diana never named names, but every word pointed to the same shadow, a familiar cold presence so unmistakable that it needed no mention. Everyone knew exactly who it was. A particular passage weighed heavily in the room. I see things that no longer belong to me. And I wonder, since when did this cease to be betrayal and become acceptance? The question hung unanswered, yet it pierced deeply into the reader's heart. Diana never mentioned Camilla by name, but there was no need. Names were irrelevant. The emotions spoke for themselves. Gentle, distant, yet haunting allusions emerged in every handwritten line. In another passage, she wrote, "I dream of peace, not glory. I don't need palaces or crowns. I just want to feel that I still matter." But I see the invitations sent out, the smiles given to others. Now I understand my place. I am a troublesome memory. No one in the room reading those pages could keep a calm expression. The words troublesome memory made time stand still, a woman once beloved, now remembered only when convenient for history. What puzzled the research team the most wasn't the content of the writings, but where they were found. None of these documents had ever been listed in Diana's official estate. According to royal records, all of her personal belongings were either returned to her family or sealed following strict protocols. By royal logic, these pages shouldn't have existed, yet there they were hidden away in the most private space of the woman who had been the haunting shadow over Diana's life. The initial surprise quickly turned into suspicion. Were these documents simply lost during an archive cleanup, or had someone deliberately hidden them away far from the eyes of those who control the royal narrative? Some say Diana never intended for these words to be made public. Yet others believe she left them behind as the final keys to unlock a door that had been sealed for 2 decades, and now that door has been opened. Camilla was informed immediately after the search concluded. According to multiple sources, her reaction ranged from extreme confusion to intense anger. She reportedly confronted her close aides, accusing them of betrayal and plotting against her from within. But what truly unsettled those around her wasn't her fury, it was the absence of any explanation. No one within the palace could answer the pressing question, why were those relics found in Camilla's garage? There was neither denial nor admission. The news spread like wildfire, and with it came an unnamed feeling creeping through the ancient stone walls of the royal palace: fear. If these letters still existed, what else had yet to be revealed? Diana, who once felt sidelined from power, had she left behind something more? Her voice, after more than 20 years, wasn't just a recounting of events. It felt like a warning. The silence that followed, cold and heavy, seemed like a final message to the entire dynasty. And then, just as the whispers within the palace hadn't yet settled, the storm of media attention began to rise. Just one photo, blurry with an unclear origin, was enough to change everything. In the photo, the edge of an envelope bore the royal seal, and the handwriting, soft yet firm, was unmistakably Diana's signature. No need for clarity, no need for confirmation. That single image was enough to set social media ablaze while newsrooms raced to uncover the truth. The image was believed to have been leaked from a search at Ray Mill House, the sprawling estate in Lac, Wiltshire, owned by Camila. Once known as a quiet retreat, a step away from the spotlight, this house was now submerged in the brightest of lights, the light of suspicion and scrutiny. The focus had shifted from vintage cars and gardening tools in the garage to a cracked wooden chest, something that could alter the entire legacy of the monarchy. If you find this story interesting and want to learn more, don't forget to hit like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any other exciting videos. Now, let's continue the story together. But what the investigators found wasn't just old tires and dusty cans of paint. Behind the haphazardly stacked boxes, hidden behind rusted metal shelves, was a narrow crack in the wall, seemingly a useless stretch of brick. But as they squeezed through, they discovered a dim, narrow hallway leading to a heavy wooden door. The door creaked open, revealing a large oak chest, worn and faded by time, sealed as though someone wanted to bury it forever. These weren't just personal writings. They weren't merely the musings of a woman. They were unanswered questions, fears that had never been spoken aloud. Inside the chest were sealed bundles of letters placed beside silk-bound notebooks, some dated, others with only a few cold, terse words. Each line was a painful confession. Diana no longer trusted the world around her. One letter, written just 6 months before her death in August 1997, left the entire investigation team in stunned silence. "If I disappear, make sure someone finds the truth. Not the headlines, not the staged photo shoots, but what really happened." It wasn't exactly an accusation, but it was close. A whisper from the past, still carrying weight in the present. What made the situation even more serious wasn't just the contents of the letters. It was also the location where they were found. Not in the National Archives, not in a Royal Museum safe. They were discovered in Camila's private garage. The woman Diana once described in a brief note, "Her presence makes me feel like a stranger in my own life." That feeling of alienation, of not belonging, of being replaced, all became a harsh reality when the truth was revealed from the most unsuspecting of places. According to palace sources, Camila's initial reaction was one of complete shock, but within hours that shock turned into public anger. She refused to accept the silence and accused her inner circle of leaking information to undermine her. However, what intrigued many wasn't just what she said, it was the absence of any explanation. No denials were made, no reasons were given for the presence of the chest. And in that silence, doubt began to grow, expanding until no one could ignore the question, why were Diana's deepest secrets in Camila's hands? When informed that the chest had been seized and its contents were under review, she was reportedly heard shouting at an assistant, "This is ridiculous! This is harassment!" Her words echoed through the palace corridors. A few days later, Queen Camilla was quietly summoned to a private hearing at the local court in Wiltshire. Officials were quick to clarify that she was not considered a suspect, merely the legal owner of the property where the documents were found, but the damage had already been done. Footage from inside the courtroom was leaked within hours. Camilla appeared tense, walking briskly alongside her lawyer and a police officer. She wasn't arrested, but the image told a different story. For many viewers, this wasn't the image of a queen going through legal proceedings. It looked more like someone facing the consequences of their actions. News outlets around the world reported at lightning speed. What was Diana trying to say? And the secrets buried in Camila's garage became the headline everywhere. That very night, Tucker Carlson inserted a special segment into his show. He said, "This is what investigators found in Queen Camila's estate, and it's not pretty." His message was sharp and serious. The issue wasn't just about the missing letters. The real question was why they were hidden in a place no one would ever think to look. In the courtroom, Camilla remained silent. Her lawyer claimed it was merely an oversight during the property transfer, but very few outside believed that explanation. Analysts warned that although there had been no official verdict, the court of public opinion had already spoken. The voice that had been silenced for over 2 decades had returned, and it wasn't coming from a monument or a documentary. It echoed from within the garage of the woman many believed had taken everything from Diana. So if Diana's true voice wasn't coming from the history books but from a garage, what then? Stay tuned. A royal reckoning has begun. Inside the palace, an undercurrent of unease quickly escalated into something far more serious. What started as a discreet legal visit to Ray Millhouse soon triggered a global media storm. Queen Camilla suddenly became the focal point of a scandal that was no longer just gossip. Her reputation, once tied to charity work and royal duties, now dominated headlines around the world, but for an entirely different reason. The chest filled with handwritten letters was discovered beneath the floor of Camila's private garage. But what stirred public outrage wasn't just their existence, it was the place where they were found. Diana's journals, profound, painful, and deeply personal, emerged within the very home of the woman who was once seen as the cause of the fractures in Diana's life. For many, this wasn't a mere accident. It was a betrayal, something too much to bear. Those pages, instead of being protected, were buried as if deliberately concealed forever. The media storm erupted. Social media was flooded with outrage. Furious comments poured in, and news programs reported non-stop. The backlash was so severe that it seemed the fragile trust in Camilla was collapsing by the hour. After the hearing, she never returned to Ray Mill House. Insider sources revealed that she was quietly escorted out, moved to a remote royal estate accompanied by a reduced security team and only one trusted advisor by her side. There were no statements, no explanations. The most notable absence came from the person closest to her King Charles III. He remained at Highgrove, staying away from cameras and avoiding all questions. According to palace sources, the king was deeply shocked. He didn't express public anger, but privately he sought answers. Why were Diana's deeply personal documents in Camilla's possession? And for how long the press office was closed, all plans were stalled. No response, no clarification. But that silence couldn't stop the rumors from spreading like wildfire. As the palace was engulfed in tension, the public's gaze turned to Prince William. Now, the heir to the throne, he had to uphold the royal image during this crisis. But this wasn't just a political crisis, it was a deeply personal wound. The letters weren't just about Diana. They were from her. A mother's voice, the suffering she had kept hidden now exposed in a way she never intended. And the fact that they were buried rather than shared was something that could not be accepted. Across the Atlantic, Prince Harry broke his silence. Although he didn't appear in person through a representative in California, he issued a brief but meaningful statement. We believe the memory of our mother deserves to be transparent, not hidden away. There are things that should never be concealed from family. He didn't mention Camila by name, but it was clear who he was referring to. That statement unmistakably echoed Diana's tone, strong, unwavering, and no longer to be ignored. And if Diana's voice had never truly disappeared but was merely buried, then this was the moment it returned unstoppable, undeniable. A chest, a garage, a woman who had been pushed out of the spotlight of history, now occupying the minds of an entire nation. Those final words, written in the dark, carried a weight beyond the paper itself. This was no longer a case of lost documents. This was the echo of memory. And that memory was now knocking at the door of the throne. The storm didn't remain confined within the palace walls. It spilled out into the streets, crossed national borders, and reached into every home where the name Diana still carried a weight that was almost sacred. Not just a symbol, but a living memory that had never fully faded. The discovery at Ray Mill House, the private residence of Queen Camilla, was no longer a private matter. A sealed chest hidden carefully behind stacks of boxes and dust-covered furniture had now become the international focal point. But it wasn't the chest that caused the uproar. It was what it had silently held for nearly 30 years. Diana's voice, rough, unfiltered, unmediated, seemed to have just left the page. Those words weren't a recounting, they were raw emotion. The Spencer family, those who shared her bloodline, reacted with outrage. Insider sources revealed they had no knowledge of the existence of these journals, let alone the circumstances under which they were discovered. For them, this was beyond anger. It was an offense, a deep wound to their pride and family memory. Their pain became even more bitter upon learning that the most private writings recorded during the most fragile time of Diana's life were kept in the very house tied to her greatest wounds. They immediately turned to legal counsel, not just to reclaim ownership, but to reclaim their dignity. For them, this was not a question of legacy, it was a moral responsibility. No one, not even the royal family, had the right to hide those fragments of memory in the shadows once again. In the British media, heated debates erupted. It wasn't just about the legal aspects, but also the moral and symbolic implications. How could such sensitive documents disappear from the royal archives? Were they stolen, accidentally lost, or intentionally concealed? Some experts believe they were mixed in with the thousands of personal belongings processed after the funeral in 1997, when the palace was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of items in a time of chaos and lack of control. Others pointed to the royal archives, where many personal items were sorted without anyone being able to track them precisely. But to the public, all these explanations seemed empty, because what lay within that chest wasn't dry records or property documents. It was the voice of the heart. It was the thoughts of a woman who had once felt consumed by the very system now striving to control her memory. And all those words were found in Camilla's garage. Not in the archives, not in a private room at Kensington Palace, but in the private home of the woman once seen as the opposing shadow. Inside Buckingham Palace, the internal divide ran deep. Some advisors urged Queen Camilla to speak publicly to take control of the growing public wave. Others warned that even a single careless remark could ignite a fire the royal family could never extinguish. And then the palace chose its oldest response: silence. No denials, no explanations, but outside that silence felt like an unspoken confession. In front of Buckingham Palace, crowds began to gather. No chanting, no anger, just quietly placing flowers. Not for the Queen, but for the woman once hidden behind golden ceremonies. Some held banners, others simply stood in silence, their distant gazes waiting for something long overdue. And in that silence, only one question echoed everywhere. How did Diana's most private journals end up hidden in the very home of the woman who replaced her? The palace offered no answer, but perhaps the public didn't need one, because in their minds, the damage had already been done. Diana had returned. Not as a statue carved from cold stone, not as an icon scrubbed clean in documentaries, but as a person real vibrant and unfinished. Camila disappeared from the public eye. No press conferences, no clarifications, just a heavy absence in the gaze of the media and public opinion. The number of searches for her name online continued to rise by the hour, but that attention didn't come with sympathy. Polls showed a sharp decline in royal support, especially among the younger generation. They grew up with a version of Diana told through old photos and articles. Now they could read her true voice, the words hesitant at times, sometimes trembling, but always resilient. Within the ancient walls of the palace, a sense of confusion began to seep into every layer of power. This was no longer a mere scandal. It was a resurrected memory, a past they thought had been closed for good. King Charles, who was usually composed and reserved, was described as utterly stunned. He canceled all appointments, declined phone calls, and only requested written reports. Some sources claimed he couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Not just because of the shock, but because he knew the past wouldn't let go. The letters still hadn't been fully published. Only a few lines had appeared in the press, but that was enough. They didn't need much to create a ripple. Diana's voice, clear, fragile, but unwavering, had risen once more. Among them, there was one sentence that made the entire nation hold its breath. If they find it, I hope it will make someone stop. A small message. But it didn't just make someone stop. It made the whole world listen.
Girls with their nails done.
Now many are asking, what else is hidden behind those stone walls? How many voices, once silenced, are waiting to be heard? Diana spoke once more. But is that the final echo or the beginning of something greater? When silence becomes a manifestation of fear, perhaps another wave of truth is waiting to rise. And what do you think? Is there something you believe is still buried? If you think this story deserves to be known by a wider audience, please hit like to spread Princess Diana's voice, a voice that was once buried, now rising strong again. Don't forget to share the video with your friends, family, and anyone who has been interested in the truth behind the palace gates. And be sure to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest developments of the story that's shaken the royal family. Thank you for watching the video, and we look forward to seeing you in the next ones.